Frederick Douglass famously said, "It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken adults." Can anyone even estimate how much money is spent on fixing broken adults? Therapy, medication, all kinds of addictions, ailments, all the ways people try to find some relief from their brokenness, whether it's the fears, the insecurities, the dysfunctionality, the abuse, the traumas they may have endured. How much money would be saved if we can build strong children and preempt the need to repair broken adults? But it's not just a money issue. It's about the health of human beings. It's money, it's time, it's energy, it's waste. How much time, how much energy are we investing in fighting demons instead of building angels? It's a critical question to ask. But the biggest question of all is how? How do you do that? So please join me in this vital discussion. How to build strong children instead of fixing broken adults. Hi, this is Simon Jacobson, and we will be speaking about how to build strong children instead of fixing broken adults. This program is dedicated by Helena Paziba in loving memory of Dora Berlin Paziba. Frederick Douglass famously said, "It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken adults." And it makes a lot of sense, of course. If you build something that's strong, then later you don't have to deal with repairing it when it's broken. It's preemptive, it's preventive medicine. How much money, energy, and waste is spent on, indeed, fixing broken adults? We don't even know. Is it in the trillions? We're talking about therapy, medication, addictions, all the ways that people are looking for some relief of their brokenness, which is addressing a childhood that may be broken in the context of a broken family, a divorce, abuse, absenteeism, dysfunctionality, the fears, insecurities, and so many other forces that traumatize children and indeed create a brokenness that people dedicated their entire lives to try to fix. And how much of it is even successful? Some even wonder, is it possible? One broken, maybe damaged goods. Maybe there is no way to repair. Or definitely not in complete fashion. That's what we want to talk about. So it's not just about making the statement that it's easier to build strong children, it's how to build strong children. And this isn't just a financial matter, how much money is spent. I mentioned time, energy, fighting demons. Everyone can look into their own hearts and souls and ask themselves this question. So it would be easy to say there's a magic formula, press a button, take a pill, and that's that. Obviously, it's not that simple. Besides the fact that things that happen to us in our formative years, that shape us, and that we're trying to compensate throughout our entire lives, often becomes concealed. That's part of the problem. It's one thing here's the issue. Something broken, let's fix it. But you don't even know it's broken, or the extent of how broken it is. And we begin to hide it. Not even deliberately. We build other personalities. We create all kinds of defense mechanisms and armor. And this is especially acute when it comes to building your own relationship. When you're vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable, that's when often this brokenness is exposed. But nobody wants to admit that. Nobody wants to say something wrong with me. Now remember, it's not there's something wrong with you. You think there may be something wrong with you. It's what happened to you. And we'll talk about that shortly. But people feel very shame. They feel weak, demoralized. They feel they'll be judged and criticized. And yes, they blame themselves. And all that contributes to that brokenness. So let's talk about this. Remember, we can't turn the clock back, meaning we can go back and see what you lived like when you were a child. You may have some memories. Many may be concealed. Many may have been embedded in our subconscious and we don't even remember consciously. Remember, a child processes things very differently. What we do see are the symptoms. And sometimes we don't even see them as symptoms. We think it's normal. I remember once counseling someone came to see me. They were literally sitting right here where we're sitting here, in the chair to my side here. And we were speaking, and I guess I moved my hand a bit. And this person flinched in terrible fear, literally recoiling. And I asked her, I said, "Are you all right?" And as we discussed it, she said to me she thought I was going to slap her. So I said, "Why would I do that?" Because that's what happened to her very often, especially when she's having a conversation, being more vulnerable. She was slapped. So this became her default state, that I deserve to be slapped, and that's what will happen, even by someone that I may trust or may cares for me. So these are things that become part of our reflexes, part of our second nature, that we try to compensate for. And how much of that is controlling our lives and we don't even know it. As I said, when we get vulnerable, that's when it's exposed. Like when someone touches a nerve, suddenly you feel pain. But how much have we done to mask that pain, to numb that pain? And that all becomes part of the problem. That all becomes part of the tremendous effort. I remember someone telling me, you don't imagine how much energy I have to exert every day just to smile. It breaks your heart, of course. So to really answer the question, how do you build strong children? And I need to also address the second half. And let's say you're already a broken adult. What do you do? I don't like giving labels, so I don't want to call anyone a broken adult. But let's say you went through where something was shattered, something was broken when you were younger. What do you do then? Is this only a solution for children and as adults too late? But let's begin with the child. Something that's so, unfortunately, so little emphasized in our society. Yes, I like to believe that biologically every parent loves their children, but they don't always know how to. And their model may be their own parents who didn't know how to nurture them. So it becomes a vicious cycle. So it's important to shine a light. What is a child? What is a child? What is a life? And I would put it this way, what is a soul? Because the child, yes, there's the body of the child, but above all, the soul of the child. So often problems can only be seen when you're lacking something. If you want to know the power of oxygen and healthy lungs, you look at someone who's struggling, God forbid, to breathe, you suddenly realize. But what does it look like to be a healthy child? So let's go back to the basics. The basics is that, number one, every human being not only deserves, but survives and thrives on being validated, that I exist, that I have value, that I'm important. Not to feed the ego, just to build that self-confidence. Those who've grown up in homes with parents that infuse them with that sense of self-esteem, know what I'm talking about. And those that grew up without it also know by the experience of the lack of it. But what does that mean exactly, to be nurtured, to be validated? So let's take it back to the earliest stages of our own development, which is in our mother's womb. A child, in most healthy situations, a healthy pregnancy, is continuously 24/7 protected, nurtured, fed. Everything is being taken care of. You're submerged in their mother's womb. It's compared to like a fish completely submerged in water, in this case, the embryonic waters. As a matter of fact, the Talmudic sages explain that on a macrocosmic level, all of existence also began underwater. Everything was underwater until land began to emerge. The same thing on the microcosm. Each of us begins underwater. Now, water has that nurturing ability. Look, when you go into water, you see waterfront property. So the evolutionary biologists will explain that people are drawn to the beaches and to water because we originate from there, amphibians. The mystics explain is because that's our natural place, the natural place of being totally engulfed, totally submerged, totally protected in the embrace, in the hug of another entity watching over you. And especially in the early formative years, it's the single most important thing we need. It's called attachment, connections. And when that's severed, as we know today, a child taken away, especially very young age, but newborn from its mother, from its parents, will forever be affected by that separation, anxiety, that ultimately the child will look for their parent. It's not just a biological thing, it's also a psychological and emotional one, a spiritual one. Because spirituality, by definition, is unity, is seamlessness. And everything that's fragmented, that's disjointed, is, frankly, disorienting, demoralizing. Because we gravitate toward unity because we come from unity. If you put it in more terms of physics, everything begins with a singularity and then breaks into parts. And you see that getting back to, let's go back to the fetus. Upon conception, one cell, fertilized egg by the seed, one cell. That cell, 18 hours later, will split into two, 2 into 4, 4 into 8, 8 into 16, and then over time, 35 to 75 trillion cells is the estimate. Trillion. The only thing more than the US deficit. So it all begins with a singularity. And emotionally and psychologically the same. So therefore, when we're embraced and when we feel we belong, you feel you're at home, and your home is not a war zone, that is the single most important thing in what creates a healthy child. It's not just that you're feeding the child, not just you're doing the right things. You're giving the soul its natural habitat, that it belongs, that it's part of a larger whole, that it's not separate, that it's not disconnected. Why is loneliness so painful? And loneliness, you can argue, is even worse than any abuse or any trauma, that you're alone in your pain. It's one thing to suffer. It's another to feel completely isolated, that no one can understand me, no one wants to be with me. Who wants to be with a person who's so miserable? The loneliness can kill you more than the actual suffering that you experienced. That's why in the book of Lamentations, it begins, woe, woe that she sits alone, referring to Jerusalem after the destruction of the temple. Alone, the loneliness. Loneliness is the personification of separation. I'm alone. A fish in water never feels alone. The water is always there for it. It's always nurturing it. We, mammals of the land, can feel alone. So we're given 9 months where you're completely not alone, you're completely submerged, completely protected. And except if there's extremely extreme situations where a mother literally does damage to her fetus, to her baby. You have that. And then hopefully when the child is born, it continues. The first embrace of a mother holding her child. The first embrace of the father embracing the child. These things are not just beautiful, romantic, and poetic visions. They reflect the essence of who we are. That we're loved. That you are loved. You deserve to be loved. That's the first most important thing in how to bring up a healthy child, how to build a strong child, is the love, the unconditional love. Now, in healthy circumstances, that's what a parent will do. But then we see parents, whether it's of their fault or not their fault, who don't know how to do it, or are not willing. Maybe they're selfish. Maybe they themselves are insecure. Maybe they don't appreciate what they have. I'm not giving excuses. I'm not looking to explain it per se. But as a parent, the most important thing is you need to know you were given a gift to watch over, to protect, to shape. You're shaping a life. And the interesting is you don't have to shape the life. You just have to feed and nurture. How does a flower blossom? You don't pull it out of the ground. Water it. Weed. Make sure there's no weeds. Create an environment that's nurturing and the flower will naturally blossom. You don't need to shape it. Don't feed it, God forbid. Don't water it. Or allow toxins and weeds and insects and other things to ravage it. Or even not in the most extreme way, then of course it will wither. And this context, emotionally and psychologically. And the thing is, it's all invisible. You don't see it. So the child grows up, slowly, in a home, we'll use a negative example, where the child is criticized, is not validated, is not given a compliment. When the child is happy about something, is dismissed. And I'm speaking only extreme terms, but it could also be in the milder forms. What's happening accumulatively? You're undermining the very spirit of the child and the very natural spirit that the child deserves to be loved. And that's the beginning of all the problems, because then the child is looking, has that vacuum, has that emptiness, that loneliness that it's seeking to fill. And it will look for friends, it will look for love, it will look for validation, it will look for anything that will nourish it. And if it's toxic, or a predator, or an abuser, or an exploiter, that child will be very vulnerable. But even if you don't find the child, let's say, grows up and is lucky, no one took advantage of the child, but the child doesn't have the resources it needs because it was not validated. So then when that child turns into an adult, seeking to build its own relationship, yeah, you can be very successful, business-wise, financially, and so on, and still be deeply insecure. It will be looking for anything to relieve that loneliness. And that's when the child begins to escape. The adult, that broken adult now begins to find ways to escape, to relieve, to numb the pain. Now, sometimes in ways that are not necessarily very destructive, but sometimes very destructive ways. Everybody knows their own story. Had the child been nurtured and the flower now has grown into an adult that has the confidence, not looking for perfection, has the confidence, the self-esteem to spread its wings, to meet someone and say, yes, I can celebrate my vulnerability. I'm not afraid of failure or not afraid of being lost or disappearing because someone may criticize me. Because you have that inner confidence, like a strong tree with deep roots. or a strong ship that can face any storm, that changes the entire narrative. That's how you build strong children. You build their souls up. You talk to them about their soul, about their mission in life, about their indispensable contribution. Every morning and every evening, I've often recommended, in the morning, not just tell your child when they wake up, I love you, here's breakfast, or whatever the regimen may be. And in the evening, not just I love you, good night, but speak for a moment that one line beautiful prayer. Thank you for returning my soul to me. Say it with your child every morning. Your child will say, you tell your child you have a unique soul and it was just given to you, returned to you. Your contract has been renewed by the source of all life. Show gratitude, appreciation. You're valued. No matter what happens in your life, you are absolutely necessary. And I, as your parent, I am blessed to have be your caretaker, your gardener. As often I emphasize, you're a gardener, that parent. A garden does not create the flowers, does not create the plants and the trees. It tends to the garden. It creates the right environment. And I'm honored to be your parent to help. You say that every morning with your child and the evening. Now we're returning your soul for the evening before you go to sleep. And again, I'm honored to be with you, to be given the opportunity to help you become the greatest you can be, to create that indispensable contribution that you're the child, only you can contribute. You do this every day. That's like watering the flower. And you don't do it, it's like depriving the flower of essential nourishment. And in addition to just providing that, it will also create conversation. At some point, that child's going to ask, what is a soul? What do you mean by value? And we'll start comparing to things going on in the world around us, how many things are negligible, are arbitrary. And you start realizing that in the world of commerce and economy and materialism, your value is only as much as someone thinks they need you for. To be their customer, their client, their vendor, their something. They want your money, they want your attention. But when you have this unconditional love, it's not dependent on because you're going to give them something. And your value is not based on your looks and not based on your buying power or your social status or your youth. It's based on the fact that you have an indispensable soul. Birth is God saying you matter. You matter, you absolutely matter, and your decisions matter. And your life matters. Not just for this moment and not just for a few people, for the entire world, for the entire cosmos. You keep feeding that to a child, you're creating, shaping, building a strong child. Now in life there's always going to be challenges. But you talk about minimizing risk and maximizing success, this is the single most important thing you can be doing. And preempting and preventing that brokenness that defines so many of our adult lives. Now that can manifest in many ways. I just gave a few examples. It manifests of how you treat the child during meals, how you treat the child after they come home from school, and your presence, attention. Many parents say, I'm too busy for my children. Providing security after work. So we have a two-parent working because they have to provide security for the children while they're depriving security from their children, for the most important security, presence. Presence, I don't mean gifts, I mean presence. You're being there for them. These things are critical. But we get distracted. Money, business, other obligations. And we forget the single most important thing in life is building that strong child. Now you'll say, what is in it for me as a parent? Well, first of all, not everything has to be something in it for you. Secondly, what greater thing can you? This is your child. This is your piece of you. And you're creating generations, because if the child has it, that child will provide that to its children. What better way to have eternal impact, perpetual impact? Now let's spend a few minutes talking, what about once you're already a broken adult? and you did not have this type of nurturing, not all is not lost. More than that, because your soul was not given to you by your parents. Your parents are the gardeners, but let's say the garden did not have a gardener or did not have an adequate gardener. There are many ways to work around it. Obviously, it's far easier, like we said, far easier to build a strong child, but it doesn't mean it's impossible to fix a broken adult. And I don't like the word fix, so I'll use the word to access that inner child within you that never was really hurt. So the conscious part of the child was hurt and is lacking that nurturing and needs to find the healthy attachments. But as an adult, especially once you discover that this is the issue, and remember, awareness of a problem is half the cure, then comes the way you have to find new ways to experience attachment that you did not get from your parents. You sometimes have to parent yourself. You have to find a friend, a spouse, a mentor. And ultimately, as I said, birth is God saying you matter, recognizing that your real value comes from another reality altogether. That's not human. Because all the people around you, though they're critical to be the support system that validates and confirms and affirms your inherent value, but ultimately comes from connecting to your soul, discovering my soul is what God gave me. No one can take it from me because no one gave it to me. And that soul is most important because the one that is the single most important reality, my mission in life, is indispensable. Is it easier with having a childhood that affirms that, as I said? Absolutely. Because then you weren't deprived of that oxygen, we'll call it that water. But you can always find that water. And that's where we have to dig deeper into the more inner recesses of the soul. It's just like when a person, God forbid, is injured or burned. So sometimes it can be a heavy burn, a burn that really affects deeper levels, but ultimately you're still here. So healing has to reach a deeper place where the burn did not affect. And that's why we say in the prayer every morning as well that the soul you've given me is pure. No matter what happens to it, you're not defined by your circumstances. So even a broken adult, that's why I don't want to use the term, because I don't want to label anyone that way, is not really broken on that level. The outer levels have been broken. And the key thing to remember is that what happened to you in your life happened to you. It doesn't define you. The big problem is we define ourselves by our circumstances, and we define ourselves by our pains, to the point we even blame ourselves. Which is odd. Why are you blaming yourself for someone else hurting you? Because you can't really tolerate that person who's supposed to love you hurt you, so you say it must be something wrong with me. Children blame themselves for the divorce of their parents. Victims will blame themselves for the abuse that they endured. Because it's easier to blame yourself and say that person didn't mean it, or I was at fault. No. So the challenge for an adult is to discover that inner part of you that deserves love and to find that love in many different ways. It's by feeding your soul. So in a healthy home environment, your parents would be helping you feed your soul, especially in the early formative years. As you get older, all of us have to learn to feed our souls. And you do so by immersing yourself in the spiritual spa that I speak about often. SPA, acronym for Study, Prayer, Action, Cognitive, Emotional, and Behavioral Conditioning. Which means every day to spend some time cognitively through reading a book or by meditating or other ways intellectually visualizing and imagining a transcendent reality that's higher and greater than the affairs of this world. Emotionally, prayer, a poem, a song, that emotionally you experience that type of transcendence. And finally, behaviorally, action, doing good deeds, acts of goodness and kindness, saying a good word to someone, being charitable, being noble, being forthcoming being kind, being giving. That nurtures your soul. You're not just doing it for someone else, you're also nurturing your own self. And especially someone that was lacking that nurturing, that's the way you complement it. That's the way you supplement it, or compensate for it, maybe is the best word. Now, of course, the sky's the limit in this process. And many of the classes I've given talk about how do you build your soul. My book, Toward a Meaningful Life, is all about that. Starting from the first chapter, Body and Soul, but the other chapters as well. How do you infuse deeper spirit, deeper meaning, deeper transcendence in every detail of your life, even the basic routines, even the things that seem pedestrian and menial. But the most important thing to know, there's no such thing as impossible, and there's no such thing as a dead end, and there's no damaged goods. We can project that upon ourselves, but that's what you need to figure out how to avoid doing that, because you can become your own worst enemy. So this really deserves more conversation. Here the main focus is how to build strong children instead of fixing broken adults. And the key is to find that love. The love is the natural state of the human being, like a fish in water, of healthy attachments and healthy connections. The single most important ingredient in life, meaning and purpose. So we have our work cut out for us. We have a generation that sure can use this message. And not just use it. This should be infused in our education systems, our schools, from the youngest of ages. Because as I said, even in pregnancy, it's already beginning. All these messages are already being embedded and downloaded into our psyches. Our schools, our homes, our environments, our communities, our friends. You know, if I have a dream, my dream was fulfilled. Every child on earth would be taught this from the youngest of age. And how many things would it preempt and prevent? Time, energy, money, resources. But it's never too late, as I said, no matter who you are, no matter how old you are. You can always begin. But you have to put the focus where the most, not on the symptoms. You're not looking to relieve yourself and numbing the symptoms. That may be short term. And also that must be done in a healthy way with discretion. But above all is to rebuild, or reclaim even better, reclaim that inner pure place in the center, in the heart of your soul. And when we do so, we will create a revolution. I believe the time is now. All the technologies, as things get easier in life, meaning access, less time spent on survival, this is going to become more acute and more acute in its need, because we'll have more vacuum and more emptiness. Because you won't be able to distract yourself and say, okay, I need to travel, or I need to spend a lot of time getting something I need. No, you can get it all in a second. And so much of the labor and investments we make now will be done by machines, AI, etc. So the soul's hunger is going to only become more pronounced. So now is the time to create this revolution. And one final point. We're coming closer to the holiday of Passover. Passover is all about children. The focus of the Seder table. The children, we change things so the children should ask questions to provoke them. It's to educate the children. As the Bible tells us, as the child will ask, here's how you should respond. The Haggadah means to relate the story. To whom? To your children. Vigada talavincha is the expression in the Bible, to relate the narrative to your children. And they will ask the questions, the 4 questions, and many other questions. It's all about shaping and building the strong child, instead of having to wait to fix a broken adult. So the emphasis in this time of the year couldn't be stronger. And this is a universal message for all. As the book of Proverbs says, educate your child according to his or her way. And when they get older, they will not waver from it. That's essentially the meaning. Educate them according to their way, which means tailor it, customize it, speak to their soul, not to someone else's. It's not a cookie cutter model. Don't fit anyone else. Don't fit them into any other mold of conformity and herd mentality. Speak to them. Cultivate their flower, their soul, their song. And then when they get older, like I said before, then the tree will be a strong tree. You won't have to start having to tamper with it or fix it. Often when parents come over to me with a child and say, bless my child or bless us, I always say, don't get in the way. Let the tree grow beautifully. Be there only to nurture and support. And that's what I say to myself and to each one of us. May we be blessed. And even those of us that don't have children, it's also relevant because we deal with other people, we deal with students, are also compared to children. Anyone you are inspiring or influencing, same idea. It all has to be with that profound nurturing, the words from the heart that enter the heart. Thank you so much. This has been Simon Jacobson. MeaningfulLife.com is our website where you can find a wide array of information, material, inspiration, life skills is what we call it. So please subscribe to our offering, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please share this with others, as well as looking forward to your feedback and comments and suggestions and thoughts. And of course, we could use your support on every level, including financially, to make these programs possible and continue to grow them in all directions by going to meaningfullife.com//donate. Thank you so much, and be well and be blessed.
This program is brought to you by the Meaningful Life Center. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at meaningfullife.com/donate.